Hello there, you're watching Special Reports here on TVRI World. For the next 2 hours, we come to you live from Jakarta, Indonesia, with a full coverage of the opening ceremony of the 44th General Assembly of the ASEAN Inter-Parliamentary Assembly here in Jakarta, Indonesia. I'm Rahmat Idris.
And I'm Siska Becker, very excited to have you to join us for another momentous gathering.
That's right.
In the year of Indonesia's ASEAN chairmanship, where together we will try to explore everything 360 degrees about the AIPA General Assembly, from the history, the roles and contributions of AIPA itself in ASEAN, and also, of course, about all the key issues that will be put forward in the General Assembly happening right now in Jakarta.
Right, when Siska mentions 360 degrees coverage of the AIPA, meaning that we're going to dissect through all angles, all perspectives of the events, what are some of the key issues that will be put on the table, and most importantly, carrying forward some of the resolutions and deliverables that have been produced from previous meetings, particularly ministerial level meetings of ASEAN under Indonesia's chairmanship this year. And we are also very privileged to today, not only to bring you live pictures from the venue, the full coverage, but also in-depth conversations with the political and international relations experts joining us in person in the studio today. Allow me to introduce for the program today, we have International Relations Observer of the Pelita Harapan University, Professor Alexius Jemadu. Professor, a very good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us here in the studio.
My pleasure.
Very excited to learn from Professor about the importance of AIPA and the realization of a stable and prosperous ASEAN.
And we've met you a couple of times, professors, through Zoom applications. We spoke a couple of times through our programs, particularly from the summit in Labuan Bajo, which is all for the ASEAN member states. And then we have the summit early September, but now this is at the level of policymakers across ASEAN member states. And also, ASEAN dialogue partners will be participating as well in terms of policy making decisions across the regions and beyond. In the meantime, we have a live report.
Yes, we do. We actually want to see how it is like at the venue of the General Assembly. We hear that it's going to start really soon. Let's have a look at the venue itself. We're also going to have a live report from our colleague there, but to make sure that the situation now is conducive. I think everybody is actually on their feet.
Right, so you're looking at live pictures from the venue here in Jakarta, Indonesia. And that is at the Fairmont Hotel, Jakarta, Indonesia, where we expect the opening ceremony of the 44th General Assembly of the ASEAN Inter-Parliamentary Assembly has begun. Siska, everyone, as you said, is on their feet. And there you have it, President of Indonesia, Joko, Widodo, standing alongside the chairpersons of Indonesian People's Representative, or we call DPR here, Indonesian Parliament, Puan Maharani, ready to start the General Assembly, Siska.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
Well, that was the AIPA song of the General Assembly of AIPA, previously preceded by Indonesian National Anthem, Indonesia Raya.
Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan, Shalom. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Fairmont Ballroom Hotel, Jakarta, at the opening ceremony, the 44th General Assembly of AIPA. First and foremost, let us welcome our distinguished guest of honor, the President of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Joko Widodo. Speaker of the House of Representatives of the Republic of Indonesia, and the President of the 44th AIPA, Her Excellency Dr. Honoris Causa Puan Maharani. Speakers and Vice Speakers of Parliament AIPA members countries and observer countries, Member of Parliament, Ministers of Indonesia, Secretary General of AIPA, Secretary General of ASEAN, and also distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is our great pleasure to have you here. The Asian Inter-Parliamentary Assembly, or AIPA, is aiming to advance solidarity, mutual understanding, collaboration, and close relationships between member countries in the Southeast Asia. To open our program, we will present you some of Indonesia's cultural arts form of pencaksilat, traditional dances, traditional children's games, Indonesian traditional singers, and snippets of the wealth of the Asian culture fabrics, showing diversities which grow a spirit for togetherness that brings social, cultural, and economic strength in Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, we present you Threads of Diversity performance.
of the 44th AIPA General Assembly. First, we saw a beautiful pencaksilat performance.
That's right. That's right, Siska. In line with the traditions of the Indonesian people, we always begin our gathering by showing our deepest appreciations to the local culture and traditions. And also it is such an honor also from Indonesia as a part of our chairmanship duty this year to present our international delegates of ASEAN member states and beyond with some of the most distinctive cultures and dances and performances, and also pencaksilat as one of the most distinctive traditional sports from the country that has been acknowledged as one of the sports in international competitions as well. Asian Games and SEA Games. So this is truly a showcase of Indonesia's deep-rooted culture, and we've just witnessed one from Betawi, if not mistaken.
There was the Betawi dance, indeed, with the bright colors and the energetic movements, very distinctive of the Betawi culture.
Yeah, and we hope that the energetic movements, as you said, would just infuse life and energy into what's going to transpire the whole day today. The deliberations of members of parliaments, representatives of ASEAN parliaments across the regions, and also from the member states, or rather dialogue partners of ASEAN, taking part in the 44th General Assembly today here in the capital Jakarta, Indonesia. You are still looking at live pictures, and there you have it also. Mutia Hafid,
yes,
the chairwoman, or rather the head of the first Commission 1 of Indonesia's parliamentary.
So, Prof. Alex, from what you've seen so far, how do you think we are as host of the 44th AIPA General Assembly with starting with these beautiful cultural performances?
I can see the enthusiasm of, first of all, Indonesia as the host of this meeting, and also how Indonesia welcome all the guests from all members of ASEAN. It shows that ASEAN can give hope for this region to build cooperation for common prosperity and regional stability that we need so much in order to recover from the pandemic crisis.
Yes.
So it's very important meeting as far as Indonesia and ASEAN as a whole are concerned. So it's good that Indonesia and other members also are enthusiastic with this meeting, and we hope that they can produce resolutions, yes, that help the governments to address all the economic issues, political issues, social, cultural issues that we are facing today as we try our best to recover from the crisis.
That's a great point, Prof, because as you were saying that, this is a time to again celebrate our uniqueness, our strength as ASEAN. We're seeing the ondel-ondel dancing on stage right now. Yeah. Perfect illustration to show how enthusiastic we are now to welcome another year where we can truly push forward all the agendas that we have to prosper as a region. Because as you said, Prof and Rahmat, of course, we're now at the heels of the 3-year pandemic that we just left behind.
Which was extremely excruciating for all of us.
And we're still dealing with the consequences even until now. So this is a great way to show that now we are ready to push forward all the economic progresses that we want to make, especially with the developing nations that comprises ASEAN as a region.
That's right. Professor, we've seen throughout the year under Indonesia's chairmanship all the deliberations, particularly towards the end of it all. We're going to be welcoming the summit in just a matter of weeks now, and all the ministerial levels are taking place. How would this parliamentary meeting of ASEAN distinguish itself from all of these meetings that we've witnessed throughout the year?
So you see that this is an inter-parliamentary institution, meaning that they will limit their talks and discussions on what are the responsibilities of the parliaments. national parliaments.
Yeah.
And I believe that they are going to, to provide inputs and resolutions that could help the executives, the governments of each member, in order to implement all the policies of ASEAN, in line with the theme of Indonesia's chairmanship this year, ASEAN Matter, epicenter of growth. Yeah? And I believe that they are going to give more emphasis on the economic need, because ASEAN members, they have to unite themselves in order to do their policies.
Right. Professor, please hold. We're going to go live again to the venue of Vermont Hotel for the opening ceremony of the General Assembly of the AIPA this year. As we believe, we are unfolding to the next item on the agenda, which is the welcoming remarks.
His Excellency Pak Joko Widodo, President of the Republic of Indonesia, Her Excellency Dr. Honoris Causa, Ibu Puan Maharani, President of AIPA, Speaker of the House of Representatives of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Bambang Susetio, Speaker of the People's Consultative Assembly of the Republic of Indonesia, Excellencies, Speakers and Deputy Speakers of the AIPA Member Parliaments and AIPA Observer Parliaments, Honorable Dr. Fadli Zon, Chair of the Inter-Parliamentary Cooperation Committee of the House of Representatives of the Republic of Indonesia, Excellency Ministers, Secretary General of ASEAN, distinguished parliamentarians, guests of the host, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, selamat pagi, salam sejahtera dan selamat datang ke Jakarta, Indonesia. It is indeed truly an honor and privilege to stand here for the first time as the 6th AIPA Secretary General at this 44th General Assembly. Today, we are here for ASEAN. ASEAN, a home of diversities, hopes, and dreams. And most importantly, we are a family bound by ties of friendship and solidarity. And being here in Indonesia this year, their presence makes me feel home. This morning, we have the honor to welcome His Excellency Pak Jokowi, the President of the Republic of Indonesia and Chairman of ASEAN. Terima kasih atas waktu yang diberikan untuk hadir ke acara AIPA General Assembly ke-44, merupakan sebuah penghormatan bagi saya dapat memulai masa jabatan saya sebagai Sekretaris Jenderal AIPA saat Indonesia menjabat presidensi ASEAN. And I would also like to extend my gratitude to Her Excellency Ibu Puan Maharani for her steadfast leadership in successfully leading the AIPA presidency. Indeed, I am proud to say that AIPA has gone a long way. 46 years of a well-deserved recognition, and will continue to evolve and transform into a broader and integrated institution. AIPA will continue to serve the needs and aspirations of the people in ASEAN. AIPA is needed in developing the 2045 ASEAN agenda, as highlighted by Bapak President Jokowi in your opening remarks, Pak, during the AIPA ASEAN Leaders Interface this year. Therefore, AIPA must strengthen its collaboration with the government to ensure ASEAN to be the epicentrum of growth. Excellencies, honorable parliaments, ladies and gentlemen, this year, Indonesia adopts the theme of ASEAN Matters Epicentrum of Growth, a theme that resonates strongly with ASEAN. The theme signifies the shared commitment and cruciality of cooperation of ASEAN to enhance its capacity in responding to various regional and global challenges, as well as reaffirming its position as the epicenter of economic growth for the prosperity of the ASEAN peoples. And in line with this, the theme of the 44th AIPA General Assembly, the responsive, Parliaments for a stable and prosperous ASEAN is very timely as a pivotal action to reinforce collaboration between the executive ASEAN and AIPA in responding to the complex challenges to become more adaptive, responsive, and prosperous. AIPA has adopted 961 resolutions ranging from political, economic, social, women, and organizational. These resolutions demonstrate as a credible testament and strategic inputs of the AIPA member parliaments to further strengthen the role of parliament in national context and to contribute to the harmonization of law among the AIPA member parliaments through adoption of policy formulation on issues of common concern. AIPA remains relevant as it has just accomplished a momentous milestone in formulating the AIPA Strategic Plan 2023-2030 for the first time. The AIPA Strategic Plan generates 4 strategic themes that are in accordance with the 3 pillars of the ASEAN community and signifies the mutual commitment of AIPA in synergizing its ongoing efforts to realize ASEAN as the epicentrum of growth that leaves no one behind. I am confident that AIPA will continue to have a crucial role to play, and its importance in shaping the regional outlook will only increase in the coming years. Thus, AIPA member parliament shall continue to serve the needs and aspirations of the people in ASEAN. I will look forward to Your Excellency's continued support and wish you very successful and fruitful deliberations. The AIPA Secretariat stands ready to give the fullest support throughout the meeting. Thank you very much. And wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, continue to our next agenda. We would like to invite the Speaker of the House Representatives of the Republic of Indonesia, Her Excellency Dr. Honoris Causa Puan Maharani, to deliver the opening address.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. Yang mulia Presiden Republik Indonesia, Bapak Joko Widodo. Yang mulia Ketua Majelis Permusyawaratan Rakyat, Bapak Bambang Susatyo. Yang mulia para Ketua Parlemen anggota AIPA dan negara observer dan negara tamu, yang terhormat para pimpinan dan anggota Dewan Perwakilan Rakyat Republik Indonesia, yang terhormat para Menteri Kabinet Indonesia Maju. Selamat datang di Jakarta bagi peserta sidang umum AIPA ke-44. Pertemuan sidang umum AIPA ke-44 berlangsung di tengah berbagai tantangan dan permasalahan dunia.
The General Assembly is held this year amidst all of the global and regional challenges.
Kehidupan yang sejahtera dan tentram. Situasi dunia saat ini masih dihadapkan pada fragmentasi antar negara, ketegangan dan konflik geopolitik, ketimpangan sosial dan ekonomi, kemiskinan, kriminalitas lintas negara, tren perlambatan pertumbuhan ekonomi global, ancaman perubahan iklim yang semakin berdampak, dan pemulihan pasca pandemi COVID-19 yang belum tuntas, serta berbagai permasalahan lainnya yang dihadapi oleh rakyat. Setiap negara dengan kapasitas dan kapabilitasnya akan berupaya maksimal untuk dapat melindungi
Each
rakyatnya.
country will
Kerjasama
try their
antar
best to
negara
protect
akan
their
sangat
citizens
membantu
and enhance
apabila
cooperation
kerjasama
between
tersebut
nations,
dapat memberikan manfaat nyata.
as it will provide
Sidang Umum AIPA
to the
ke-44 menjadi
everyone.
kesempatan
The
bagi
44th
parlemen di
General
Asia Tenggara
Assembly
untuk dapat
for ASEAN
memperkuat komitmen
will strengthen
dalam
commitment
merespon berbagai
to
tantangan
respond all
dan
these
permasalahan
challenges,
global dan regional.
both regional and global
AIPA
problems.
sebagai stakeholder yang mewakili perspektif rakyat
AIPA
yang
will
diwakili
function as a
akan
stakeholder to
berorientasi
represent
pada aspirasi rakyat dalam merespon
needs
berbagai tantangan
importance of the
serta
people
permasalahan global dan
to
regional.
address all of these challenges.
Aspirasi rakyat adalah mengenai pemenuhan hidup
People's
yang aman,
aspirations
tentram,
is to have a
sejahtera,
good, prosperous,
sehat,
safe life.
berkeadapan, dan bersahabat.
In good health
Hal ini
and
sejalan dengan tema sidang umum AIPA
friendly relationships.
ke-44, yaitu
And the General
Responsif
Assembly
Parliament
is
for a Stable and
held
Prosperous
with the theme of
ASEAN,
Responsive
yang
Parliament for a
merupakan
Stable and
komitmen
Prosperous
kita
ASEAN.
bersama dalam ikut menciptakan perdamaian
It is
dan kesejahteraan di Asia
our
Tenggara.
goal to create
AIPA
a
harus
prosperous nations
dapat
across
menemukan
ASEAN.
titik temu komitmen bersama di tengah
We need to
perbedaan
find a
antar
common
negara
ground
AIPA.
of our commitment to
Bapak
enhance
Presiden
cooperations
dan
between
para tamu yang
AIPA member
terhormat,
states.
dalam kesempatan ini dan terkait dengan peran sidang umum AIPA ke-44, maka sejumlah agenda strategis yang perlu
number of
menjadi
strategic
perhatian pada
agendas have
pertemuan
been
AIPA
set
ini
for
antara
the General
lain.
Assembly this year.
Pertama, perlunya
One,
AIPA memperkuat komitmen
to
dalam
strengthen
menjaga soliditas
commitment
ASEAN
in
di tengah
ASEAN
berbagai
solidarity
masalah di masing-masing negara. Kita
in
tetap
addressing
perlu
problems in
menjaga
each
komitmen bahwa kebersamaan ASEAN
member
akan
states of
saling
ASEAN.
dapat membantu dan
And
memperkuat.
We commit to help each
Bersama,
other and strengthen
ASEAN
each other.
akan menjadi lebih kuat.
And together
Kedua,
we will become
AIPA
stronger.
perlu memastikan
Number two,
kepentingan ASEAN
we need to
terus
ensure
didengar dan diperhatikan
that
dalam
ASEAN's
menyelesaikan
voice
berbagai
will be
permasalahan
heard
yang membutuhkan komitmen global di tengah isu
and it
rivalitas
requires global
kekuatan besar,
commitment
isu kemiskinan, ketimpangan,
address,
industrialisasi, globalisasi, gender,
problems of
kesehatan,
poverty,
pendidikan,
gender
dan lingkungan
equality,
hidup
health,
merupakan
education, and
sebagian
environment
masalah
are
yang
some of
penyelesaiannya
the most crucial
membutuhkan komitmen global.
issues that require our
Ketiga,
commitment.
AIPA
Number
perlu
three,
tetap mendorong bahwa di
need
tengah
to
persaingan kekuatan besar,
forward
dunia perlu
competitiveness.
menyelesaikan isu prioritas yang
We need to
menjadi
resolve
kepentingan bersama,
priority
yaitu
issues that's
antara
become
lain tata ekonomi
pertinent to
dunia
all
yang
of us.
adil serta mitigasi perubahan iklim.
That is
Tata
a fair
ekonomi,
justice
tata
to the
ekonomi global
stage
harus dapat semakin
and
memberikan
addressing
kemampuan
climate change.
setiap negara untuk sejahtera.
And it is the right for each nation
mitigasi
to be
perubahan
prosperous.
iklim, menurut PBB,
climate change,
kita
and
sudah
according to
memasuki era
United
global
Nations, we've
boiling,
entered
bukan lagi global warming. Keempat,
no longer
dialog antara parlemen
global
negara
warming,
AIPA dengan negara observer
global
diharapkan dapat menjembatani
So AIPA
dan
is hoped to
membangun
bridge
hubungan yang potensial dalam
these
mengembangkan
relations
preventive diplomasi. Pada
to
forum
push
ini
forward the agenda
turut
of
hadir
preventive
18
diplomacy.
parlemen negara observer dan tamu
We also
yang menjadi
welcome
mitra
observer
parlemen anggota
and guest
AIPA.
countries of AIPA.
Kehadiran parlemen berbagai negara,
The presence of
termasuk dari negara
parliaments
observer,
from all of these
tentunya
countries,
menjadikan
including
sidang umum
observers,
AIPA menjadi platform utama diplomasi parlemen yang inklusif di kawasan. Bapak
signifies the
Presiden dan para
inclusivity
tamu yang
of
terhormat,
AIPA.
stabilitas merupakan prasyarat bagi pembangunan
Stability is the
dan pertumbuhan
requirement
ekonomi di
for
Asia
development
Tenggara.
and economic growth in
ASEAN yang damai, stabil, dan
Peaceful
sejahtera akan
and
berkontribusi
prosperous ASEAN will
bagi
contribute
stabilitas dan pertumbuhan ekonomi
stability
global.
and economic
Oleh
growth
karena itu,
globally.
AIPA akan
Thus,
terus
AIPA
melanjutkan, memperkuat, dan
will
mempertajam
continue to
komitmen
strengthen
yang
and sharpen
diperlukan
our commitment
untuk menjaga dan
to
memastikan
preserve
kawasan Asia Tenggara yang
and to make
kondusif,
sure that
damai, stabil, dan
ASEAN region
sejahtera.
is
Parlemen
peaceful
anggota
and
AIPA
prosperous.
juga akan terus mendorong kehidupan
parliaments
politik
will
masyarakat
continue
di kawasan
to push
Asia Tenggara
political
yang lebih
education
demokratis,
and
memenuhi
we push
hak
for
azazi
more
manusia,
democratic society.
dan memperkuat rule of law berbasiskan
strengthen rule
pada
of law
kekhasan masing-masing
based
negara.
on
Politik
each
luar
country's
negeri setiap
characteristic.
negara anggota AIPA dijalankan berdasar kepentingan nasional yang berbeda-beda. Namun hal
It is
ini
run on,
tentunya tidak
different
menghalangi
national
agar negara anggota
objectives,
ASEAN
but
memiliki
it should not
komitmen
hinder
untuk berkoordinasi
our commitment
dalam
to
kepentingan
coordinate
bersama.
together.
Diplomasi parlemen dapat meningkatkan
Parliament
saling
diplomacy
pengertian
will
dan
enhance
membangun
understanding
kepercayaan,
and
trust
build
building
trust
antar negara di Asia Tenggara.
between ASEAN member states.
Indonesia melalui DPR RI sendiri dalam 2
Indonesia,
tahun
through
ini
its
telah
parliament in
menjadi
the
salah
past
satu
2
pusat
years
diplomasi
has become the
parlemen
center of
global dan
diplomacy
regional.
for global and
Pada
regional
tahun
diplomacy.
2022,
In
DPR
2022,
RI memimpin Inter-Parliamentary Union
our
atau IPU
parliament
Assembly ke-144 dan
chaired
the
the
8G20
144th
Parliamentary Speaker Summit
International
20 atau
Parliamentary
P20. Dan pada tahun 2023 ini
2023,
kami memegang presidensi
we host
AIPA.
the presidency of
Semua
AIPA.
ini bertujuan untuk memperbesar kontribusi parlemen dalam
All aim
pembahasan
to
berbagai isu
enhance the
internasional.
contributions of parliaments to
Karena
address
kami
regional
menyaksikan berbagai
issues.
persoalan internasional
We
telah
witness
berdampak langsung
international
bagi rakyat
problems that have
yang
impacted
memilih kami.
the people who have
Bapak
elected us.
Presiden dan para tamu yang terhormat, dinamika perkembangan
Excellencies,
geopolitik di masa
Presidents,
depan akan semakin kompleks
the
dan
political dynamics
menimbulkan
will
berbagai
even
keadaan
be more complex
normal
in
baru
the
atau
future.
new
A new normal
Untuk menghadapi hal
is
ini, saya
something
mengajak
that
kita
we
untuk
all
lebih
need
solid,
to come
mencari
together,
persamaan di antara negara-negara
find common
ASEAN
ground
dan
among
berupaya
ASEAN member states,
memperkecil perbedaan.
and
Marilah
close the gaps.
kita bekerja sama menjaga Asia Tenggara yang kondusif untuk mewujudkan kehidupan masyarakatnya yang tentram, maju dan sejahtera. ASEAN kuat karena bersatu, ASEAN bersatu karena kuat. One ASEAN family, together we are one. Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Santi, Santi, Santi Om.
That was the welcome remarks of the Speaker of the House of Representatives and President of AIPA, Puan Maharani.
Royal ladies and gentlemen, before we move to our next agenda, we will present you a video of traditional Asian fabrics.
Behold ASEAN, where diversity is not only appreciated, but beautifully woven into the threads of our community.
That's fundamental. Regionnya beda. Cannot be that way.
Each country
You were
has
saying?
its own uniqueness in the fabric
Okay,
of its
so
Yeah.
we're now back in the studio. There's a lot to dissect.
That's right.
with
And currently, what you're seeing from the opening ceremony is the display of the so-called ASEAN fabrics. We believe that it is the very foundations of ASEAN cultures and tradition put together, and it's sort of woven into one, as we call it, ASEAN unity. Siska.
Yes. So it's symbolic,
Yeah.
but also it's actually a literal representation of how ASEAN countries, although they have their own distinct cultures,
That's
but
right.
the similarity between us, we do appreciate our cultures and see them as our strengths. That's actually is a beautiful way to explain it.
Yeah, another way of symbolizing harmony and diversity, not only in our country, but also across the regions of Southeast Asia. Let's head back to our guest for the program again, Professor Alexius. We've heard so many key issues put on display,
Yeah.
delivered, conveyed by first the Secretary General of AIPA and then the Speaker of the House of Indonesian Parliament. What do you make of these two remarks, Professor?
Yeah, I can see that they wants to demonstrate the importance of what they call parliamentary diplomacy.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, how national parliaments support their government at the national level in order to harmonize laws that can be supportive of what the governments are going to do in order to create common prosperity in the region.
Joko, Widodo,
As you can see that they have
with the
produced
ceremonial
policies.
procession
Yeah.
Okay.
of the
Prof,
44th
excuse us.
General
We're now going to
Assembly
go
of
back
AIPA.
Okay.
to Fairmont Hotel, where
Right.
President of the Republic of Indonesia, Joko Widodo, will now take the podium for his welcoming remarks. Let's have a listen.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Yang saya hormati Ketua DPR Republik Indonesia dan sekaligus Presiden AIPA ke-44, Ibu Dr. Puan Maharani, yang saya hormati Ketua MPR Republik Indonesia, yang saya hormati para ketua dan para wakil ketua, serta seluruh anggota Parlemen Negara Observer AIPA, yang saya hormati Sekjen AIPA, para anggota Parlemen yang saya hormati, hadirin dan undangan yang berbahagia. Selamat datang di Jakarta, the headquarters of ASEAN. Suatu kehormatan bagi saya bisa hadir di pertemuan pada pagi hari ini. Parlemen adalah keterwakilan suara rakyat. Parlemen adalah cermin keterwakilan suara rakyat. Pembukaan Piagam ASEAN dimulai dengan kata "We the Peoples". Artinya, aspirasi rakyat ASEAN harus dikedepankan. Kepentingan rakyat ASEAN harus diperjuangkan. Bapak Ibu yang saya hormati, sudah 56 tahun ASEAN berkontribusi besar bagi perdamaian dan stabilitas di kawasan. Namun, kita tidak boleh lengah, apalagi terlena. Perdamaian dan stabilitas kawasan tidak bisa datang dengan sendirinya. Perdamaian dan stabilitas kawasan harus diupayakan, bahkan diperjuangkan. Untuk itulah ASEAN harus bekerja sama secara erat dan saling percaya untuk menjadi lokomotif dalam menjaga perdamaian dan stabilitas di kawasan. Sikap saling percaya dan soliditas ASEAN sangat penting. Soliditas antar pemerintah anggota ASEAN, soliditas antar parlemen anggota ASEAN, dan soliditas dengan pemangku kepentingan lainnya. Jika ASEAN solid, maka ASEAN dapat memainkan peran sentralnya dan ASEAN dapat terus relevan. Bapak Ibu, hadirin yang saya hormati, kita harus bersama-sama memperjuangkan kesejahteraan rakyat kita, kesejahteraan yang berkeadilan, dan bersyukur pertumbuhan ekonomi ASEAN tetap stabil. Oleh OECD, Asia Tenggara dianggap sebagai salah satu driver pertumbuhan ekonomi dunia. Sebagai Ketua ASEAN Indonesia, ingin menjadikan kawasan ASEAN tetap menjadi pusat pertumbuhan ekonomi dunia sebagai epicentrum of growth. Oleh karena itu, integrasi ekonomi ASEAN harus diperkuat, hambatan perdagangan dengan mitra ASEAN harus dihilangkan, kerjasama ekonomi yang setara dan saling menguntungkan harus ditingkatkan. Survei EU ASEAN Business Sentiment yang melibatkan 600 sektor swasta di Uni Eropa yang baru saja dirilis 1 Agustus yang lalu, hasilnya cukup menggembirakan. ASEAN dinilai sebagai kawasan dengan kesempatan ekonomi terbaik, yaitu 63%, diikuti RRT 12%, India 8%, dan 80% melihat ASEAN sebagai kawasan penting. 84% ingin meningkatkan angka perdagangan dengan ASEAN. Survei tersebut menunjukkan bahwa trust, kepercayaan terhadap ASEAN sangat tinggi. Dan tugas kita semua untuk menggunakan trust tersebut, menggunakan kepercayaan tersebut untuk membangun Asia Tenggara yang sejahtera. Itu semua membutuhkan dukungan Parlemen ASEAN. Kita semua perlu kerja keras agar harapan tersebut dapat terwujud. Sekali lagi, Piagam ASEAN dibuka dengan "We the Peoples". Artinya, kepentingan rakyat ASEAN di atas segala-galanya. Dan dengan mengucap Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, sidang AIPA ke-44 secara resmi saya buka. Terima kasih.
With this, officially I open the
warahmatullahi
44th
wabarakatuh.
AIPA General Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, and please kindly remain on stage, and would like to invite to come to the stage Her Excellency Dr. Honoris Causa Puan Maharani and Her Excellency Architect Siti Rozai Merianti Dato Haji Abdul Rahman. And to officially launch the opening ceremony, Mr. President, Mrs. Puan, and Mrs. Siti, please kindly stay behind the cube where we will immediately begin the ceremonial procession. Ready to press the button, Mr. President? On my count. In 3, 2, 1. Round of applause. Right, ladies and gentlemen, we have just witnessed the opening ceremony of the 44th General Assembly of AIPA, and we would like to express our gratitude for your participation to all guests that have been here with us. And thank you, His Excellency President Joko Widodo, for opening the 44th AIPA General Assembly. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise. President Joko Widodo will leave the ballroom.
Yeah. Well, that was it. The opening ceremony was on the way. It was very well done.
Yes, very smooth, yeah?
Very smooth, and some of the most significant remarks have been delivered, Siska and also Professor. And at the peak of it all, we saw, after the buttons were pressed by Presidents, the Secretary General and House Speaker of Indonesian Parliament, that all the flowers that you see behind us have started to bloom in graphics, meaning that it's time for ASEAN regions, particularly their parliaments, to show that we can grow from now on, recover from the pandemic. Professor, some of the most significant, the most significant key points that have been pushed forward by our president in his opening address was peace and stability. Interpreted by Siska over and over again, the words peace and stability that came up very often.
Yes.
So how do you think this will play into the discussions of parliamentarians across ASEAN regions and beyond?
Yeah, you see that there are geopolitical tensions now in Europe. Yeah, we have war in Ukraine, and also in this region, in Southeast Asia, Asia Pacific as a whole. And you see that ASEAN plays a very important role in bridging these
gaps, differences.
Yes.
To mediate between
the great powers
that are conflicting. Yeah.
Because the great powers, you see that it's very easy for them to be tempted by, the power politics.
Power play, they call it,
power
Professor.
play, in order to, to seek military preponderance. But ASEAN, as a combination of small and middle powers, try their best in order to change this power politics into the narrative of economic cooperation, which is open, inclusive, and try to promote the prosperity of all the people of ASEAN. And I think it is good that President Joko Widodo, as the chairman of ASEAN this year, try to emphasize and to raise the awareness of these members of parliament in order to do their best, in order to create stability in this region, because stability is required for prosperity. You cannot have economic development, economic recovery without peace and without stability in the relations between among ASEAN countries and their relations also with the great powers who are present here in this region.
Yes, I think it's pretty clear from the speech of the president that we just heard together.
Right.
He mentioned from the very beginning the importance of putting forward the interests of the people of ASEAN.
That's right.
When we talk
Yeah.
about conflicts and wars,
Yeah.
the number one victims are always
That's right.
the
We
people.
the peoples, he
Yeah.
said, I think 3 times.
Yes.
That's true.
So
Because
what
if
do you think of this,
yeah,
Prof?
if you ask the people whether they want war or peace, obviously they will choose peace. Yeah? So that they can send their kids to school, you know, they can develop their economies, yeah, to live in peaceful way, yeah, because war can only take your resources in order to buy weapons, and you have less money for education, for health, and for infrastructure. So it's very important for ASEAN countries to focus and to utilize their limited resources in order to build all what their people need most. Yeah, the education, how to eradicate poverty, how to build infrastructures in order to strengthen their competitiveness. Yeah, because we are living in increasingly globalized and digitalized world. And ASEAN countries, they need competitiveness in order to be able to promote their economic growth.
Indeed.
Very important.
Peace and stability is key. You cannot have economic growth without peace and stability.
That's true.
And of course, everybody, when they ask the people, would you like war or peace? Everybody would like peace, of course. But sadly, unfortunately, the fact is we have ongoing conflicts happening right now as we speak. The war in Ukraine is still happening. The conflict in Myanmar is also still happening. Do you think maybe by the president repeatedly saying, please put forward the interests of the people in his speech is like a subtle shade to all the leaders, especially in this case, the policymakers, to put forward tangible results in this gathering, not just normative statements that lead nowhere, and by the end, the people will keep on suffering because of this ongoing conflicts.
Deliverable, something that
that's
we
true,
can
something concrete.
do.
That is what the people are waiting for from this meeting. And you see that peace, you know, it has to be achieved and it has to be accomplished, and it doesn't come automatically and you will have peace. No, you have to work very hard, you have to develop mutual understanding, solidarity among ASEAN countries in order to build peace. And that is what they have done for many decades since the establishment of ASEAN back in 1967. So we are grateful that we live in this region with stability and also peace, so that all these countries can promote their economic growth, can improve the welfare of the people because of the stability that we have.
Please hold again, Professor, as we go live to the venue again. We believe that in just a few moments, the press conference by the House Speaker will now take place.
Alhamdulillah, pembukaan sidang umum ASEAN AIPA sudah selesai dibuka oleh Bapak Presiden Joko Widodo, dan ini merupakan puncak dari salah satu acara keketuaan DPR RI, di mana saya selaku Ketua DPR RI dan Presiden AIPA saat ini menjadi ketua Indonesia di ASEAN tahun 2023 ini. Pada kesempatan ini tentu saja kami berharap bahwa sidang ini akan berlangsung dengan aman, lancar, sehingga tema-tema atau hal-hal yang menjadi satu kesepakatan nanti bisa didapat dari hasil dari sidang umum AIPA ke-44 ini. Banyak hal yang akan dibahas pada sidang umum AIPA ini, dan bagaimana kita sebagai satu keluarga ASEAN nantinya tetap bisa menjalankan ASEAN yang bersatu sebagai teamwork dan tentu saja bagaimana menjalankan apa yang menjadi cita-cita di ASEAN, bahwa ASEAN nantinya akan bisa menjadi satu negara yang kuat bukan hanya di regional namun juga di negara-negara kawasan dan di dunia internasional. Karenanya perlu AIPA untuk dapat mendorong penyelesaian permasalahan-permasalahan yang ada di dunia yang akan menjadi isu prioritas dari semua isu yang ada dan sedang berlangsung di dunia. Dan bagaimana kami tadi sudah menyepakati dengan semua negara-negara anggota ASEAN bahwa sebagai keluarga, sebagai saudara, kami akan bekerja sebagai tim yang mendorong, memperkuat dan membuat ASEAN menjadi lebih kuat di masa yang akan datang. Terima kasih. Ada pertanyaan?
Any questions?
Ya. Ya, terkait dengan isu Myanmar, tentu saja pada sidang-sidang komisi akan kita bahas.
Well, we believe that question and answers with the members of the press are taking place at the moment, and trust me, there's going to be a lot of questions from members of the press towards the parliaments of ASEAN. But now let's go on ahead with our question and answer here in the studio. I'd like to go over to Professor Alex again. Professor, in terms of the establishment of AIPA as an institutions representing ASEAN parliaments, what exactly is the role of these institutions in a decision-making process of ASEAN due to its unique characteristics of non-interference policy amongst the internal affairs of individuals member countries of ASEAN?
Yeah, that's a good question, Rahmat. But before I answer that question, let us look at the nature of AIPA itself.
Okay.
You see that when you open the ASEAN Charter, interestingly, AIPA is not mentioned there.
In ASEAN Charter?
ASEAN Charter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why was that, if you know?
I checked the ASEAN Charter from beginning till end, and you cannot find AIPA there. Yeah, it means that compared to other organs or institutions of ASEAN, you see that AIPA is actually of secondary importance. But having said that, as it was emphasized by the President in his opening speech, that the people of ASEAN, they play a very important role. How their aspirations can be channeled, in order to raise the awareness of the government that all policies should reflect the interest of the people of ASEAN. But you see that it is up to the national parliament in order to decide whether they, they go further with deliberation, consideration of policies to translate all the resolutions from this meeting into their legislation at the national level. So, national parliament plays more important role compared to this institution. Here, they may discuss many things, many issues that raised by all these high government officials, but at the end of the day, it is the national parliament who decide whether they, translate this into legislation or not.
Professor, please enlighten us. Does it mean that the resolutions that will be produced at the General Assembly will be adopted in a way by respective member countries of ASEAN into law, of national law, as you mentioned?
Yeah, you see that they will create resolutions, right, on many issues of common concern among ASEAN countries. But then all these national parliaments, they go back to their country, they will deliberate what is important, what is suitable, what is relevant for their countries. And
based on their own national interests.
Right. AIPA is not in the position to impose those resolutions on them. So national parliaments, they have their own sovereignty, they have their own autonomy in order to make further deliberation, consideration in line with their own interest. Now, it's not fair to compare this AIPA and the European Parliament. But let me say, a contrast in order to understand it better, right? In Europe, the members of European Parliament are elected by the people, but not here. Here, the members are national parliaments. So national parliament play a very important role. Now, if we connect this with the principle of non-interference, and you see, that is actually the limitation of ASEAN in order to, to promote their policies. I think they don't have much freedom in order to come up with bold statements, bold solution to the problems, because they have to be careful in order not to violate this sacred principle of non-interference, not to give the impression that you intervene in the domestic affairs of any ASEAN members.
Okay.
So it's a very important principle for ASEAN.
Yeah, very interesting to learn the mechanism of AIPA itself and how it should proceed then to try to solve all the problems that was mentioned in the opening remarks. But before we continue our discussion with Prof. Alex, maybe we should go to Audrey now, who's there at the venue at Fairmont Hotel to tell us a little bit more of what is happening right now at Fairmont Hotel after the official opening of the AIPA General Assembly. Audrey?
Yes, Rahmat and Siska, just now that was the opening ceremony of the 44th ASEAN Inter-Parliamentary Assembly, and we also just saw the closing of the press conference by Her Excellency Dr. Puan Maharani. So just to sum up some of the things that are said today at the opening ceremony, there were welcome remarks by Her Excellency Siti Roza Merianti Dato Haji Abdul Rahman, who is the Secretary General of AIPA, and she mentioned how there has been 46 years of recognition to evolve and transform into a broader and integrated institution. And AIPA will continue to serve the needs of ASEAN and also will be significant in order to fulfill the initiative of ASEAN 2045. AIPA so far has adopted 961 resolutions from various aspects such as political, economical, as well as societal. And the 4 strategic themes of AIPA are also in accordance with the 3 pillars of ASEAN. Hence why it will be really important, this partnership between AIPA in this year's Indonesia's chairmanship of ASEAN. After that, there were also opening remarks from Her Excellency Dr. Puan Maharani, who is the Speaker of the House of Representatives of Indonesia and the President of the 44th ASEAN Inter-Parliamentary Assembly. She mentioned some priority issues, Rahmat and Siska, some that I believe are really significant to mention today, including the global economic challenges that we are going through, climate change and the repercussions from COVID-19. So with AIPA, we can together create a peaceful, safe, societal welfare region, especially in ASEAN. We must meet a meeting point between the differences of the countries in ASEAN for AIPA. And he mentioned first how in climate change right now, as we are going into a global boiling point, we must work together to mitigate the repercussions of these issues. There must be dialogue between AIPA as well as the observer countries, who today 18 of them are also present, as well as their delegations, about how to have a great preferential relationship in order to increase the preventive diplomacy. Also, another theme that is mentioned is stability in the ASEAN region, which is incredibly important. Rahmat and Siska mentioned numerous times, also by our very own President Joko Widodo from this year's ASEAN Summit, in order for us to have great economic growth in the region. But first, we must have stability and peace in the region. And also, there must be trust building between borders and coordination. And she ended by saying that one ASEAN family, together we are one. After that, there were remarks from our very own President Joko Widodo, who mentioned that the ASEAN Charter is opened by the words, "We the people." What does that mean? It means that the aspiration as well as the needs of the ASEAN people must be at the forefront, and they must be heard as well as attended to, especially this year. ASEAN has the best economic opportunity, with 63% seeing them as so, 80% seeing ASEAN as significant, 84% wanting to have more trade with ASEAN, as well as having high trust in the region. These are the words that are prioritized and emphasized by Joko Widodo, which is that ASEAN, a lot of regions around the world have high trust. So this high trust must be utilized wisely by ASEAN, as now we are an emerging region as well as bloc, to further our economic growth as this chairmanship. So why is it important to discuss these issues? As discussed in the press conference today by Her Excellency Puan Maharani, she mentioned how AIPA has to focus on the priority issues that were discussed before, how it should be a strong regional country. And also, as this year's Indonesia's chairmanship of ASEAN, it should be at the forefront of the issue. So next up after this, the plan is for them to hopefully have a joint communique, which is held before as well at the 56th ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting. So we are looking forward to what the result and deliverables of those joint communique as well as this meeting will be. And that is all from my report. I'm Audrey Toyo reporting for TVRI World, as well as camera person Arianto. Now back to you, Rahmat and Siska, in the studio.
Right, Audrey Utoyo there with the latest from the venue and giving us the recap of the opening ceremony, summarizing it for us. Thank you very much for the report. We look forward to hearing more from you on the event. Thank you, Audrey.
Okay, now let's go back to our guest,
Professor. Burning questions in our minds now.
Yes.
We cannot wait. Just to piggyback on what our colleague has said there from the venue, she had a first-hand account of what has transpired for the opening ceremony. Right. But you mentioned briefly that we cannot impose each and every member state of ASEAN to adopt, to legislate what is produced from AIPA General Assembly, the resolutions. So in what way do you think that this institution can persuade policy recommendations for each individual parliaments of ASEAN member states? Particularly, we have each different characteristics of a government. We have direct democracy, representative democracy, even monarchy in Thailand. So
that's true,
what's the mechanism here?
Yeah, you see that ASEAN consists of different types of political regime, and it tells us about the real power or real strength of their parliament, and it talks a lot of how these recommendations can be translated into legislation. But of course, the government officials, the executive bodies, they have to listen to the voice of the parliaments, especially in a democratic country like Indonesia, because in a democratic country you have this notion of balance of power between the legislative bodies and also the executive bodies. But of course, you see that we have to take into account the fact that parliaments in ASEAN, they have different democratic mechanisms of their own. So it is very important to put that into the equation of your logic of this thing. But having said that, as far as it is about global challenges like economic recovery, climate change, it's easy for them to come up with a consensus, because it is obvious that we need to mitigate all these negative consequences of all these problems. And in that case, related to economic issues, I think recommendations from this meeting can be very important, and I believe it is easy for each of the national parliaments to adopt in order to see how they can support their government in order to enhance economic policies, to mitigate the El Nino, climate change.
Which is happening right now.
That's true. And in order to address all the food security, energy security, in order to enhance the prosperity of their people.
Okay. Okay, Prof. So actually in the opening remarks of the Secretary General, which was also mentioned by Audrey in her recap just now, the AIPA has 46 years of history. Now we know ASEAN is 56 years old.
We're like half that age.
Yeah, 46. Yeah, since
so much younger than that.
The institution should be mature enough to produce and.
So actually, AIPA did not exist at the conception of ASEAN. So maybe that is why it didn't. It was not included in the ASEAN Charter. But throughout the history of AIPA itself, it has tried numerous times to assert itself much more influence in the establishment of policies, and especially now that Indonesia is chair of ASEAN, you can really feel that Indonesia is trying its hardest to make ASEAN more influential and more impactful, not just in the region, but also globally. And also for the AIPA itself, they want to make AIPA the drivers of economic growth. Now, do you think Indonesian presidency of ASEAN, chairmanship of ASEAN, could actually give a boost to all the efforts for AIPA to actually have more tangible results, as we were speaking before, especially for ongoing conflicts that really do need quick results, not just, prolonging the discussions and then
carry it over to the next one. Chairmanship.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's true. Indonesia, as informal leader of ASEAN, can play such role. In order to share Indonesia's experiences with the rest of ASEAN, and to some extent, Indonesia has demonstrated its success in recovering from the economic crisis, and how we manage the diversity of our people. We can share those experiences to the rest of ASEAN. But again, you see that the mechanism of decision making in ASEAN is very much based on what they call the ASEAN way, consensus. They respect the independence, autonomy, the uniqueness of each member in order to decide what is best for each of these ASEAN members. Because Indonesia can share its good experiences, how to recover from the pandemic crisis, how to create stability despite of the diversity of your people. But then each ASEAN countries, they have their own type of political regime, and they have the freedom whether they want to take this lesson from Indonesia or not. But it's good to share our experiences to other countries as well.
Professor,
as best practices. That's true.
Professor, we all had listened to the press conference by the House Speaker before it got cut off. And if you listen carefully, just moments before it was cut off to the studio, was that a journalist asking about what sort of recommendations, what sort of tangible results this forum can make to address Myanmar conflicts. This is something that's been on the table for years, and also just echoing what the foreign minister has said during the AMM just a few weeks ago, if not a month. So what do you think a change can be made through policy making process by these institutions to address Myanmar conflict?
Okay, to be honest, there's not much that we can expect from this, because if you read the ASEAN Charter, you will see that the highest body in ASEAN is the ASEAN Summit. It means the executive plays a very important role. So if they have problems there in order to address this political crisis, how much less these parliaments can do. You cannot expect that they can go beyond what the executives have achieved so far. So a 5-point consensus is what ASEAN has tried to do their best.
But even that,
even that there has been not much progress. Up till this month. And let us hope that in the next summit they will produce something more significant than what they have accomplished before.
Even the parliamentary diplomacy will not have, do you think, Professor? Because you mentioned, I don't know what sort of parliament they have in Myanmar, but is there any way for ASEAN Parliamentary Forum to go?
Yeah, they can play some role in order to raise the awareness of the members of parliament who represent their people. But as I said earlier, that there's nothing much we can expect from them if the executive bodies cannot achieve what they have promised in the 5 points of consensus.
Okay.
So you see, but still parliamentary democracy is important in order to, to be on the same page, yeah?
Okay.
The urgency for ASEAN in order to address this issue in Myanmar, the political crisis, in order to maintain the credibility of this institution in the eyes of the people of Southeast Asia themselves.
That's right.
Yeah?
Well, as a matter of fact, upholding democracy is still the biggest homework in Myanmar at the moment.
That's true.
If we look at the actions of the military junta, right?
Yeah. So far, I think at least 6,000 civilians has been killed in Myanmar.
That's
that is
true.
what that we
That's
know
true.
of. So hopefully we can reach some sort of solution. If not here at AIPA General Assembly, maybe at the summit in September.
We're making strides here. Hopefully this contributes to it.
So it is a very complex issue, the Myanmar conflict.
Actually, that's true.
And you mentioned that there is some limitations of what the policymakers here can do because their power is limited nationally. They can only do so much for the national interest. So that means maybe for other issues such as the South China Sea dispute, the U.S.-China rivalry in Southeast Asia,
or in Ukraine.
Also nothing much they can do here actually in terms of policy making.
Yeah, at best they can produce, kind of normative statements. We have to do this, we have to do that, and
like suggestions.
The situation is very complex, and I can say that it is beyond their capacity to come up with real solutions. What people may expect from them. But still, it is good that they are on the same page. Look, we have problems. We have to keep the unity of this regional entity because you see that if you compare Asia and Europe, the good thing in Asia that you have a regional entity like ASEAN, that can sit in the middle, to connect this, to bridge, the gap between the great powers, and you don't have that kind of regional entity in Europe, and that's why you have war in Ukraine. So ASEAN still plays important role with all the limitations it has. We have to acknowledge that, but they have ASEAN mechanisms. ASEAN mechanism in order to invite the great powers to sit together, at least to have dialogue, to have what they call preventive diplomacy. You have to prevent the war from happening, because once the war takes place, it is very difficult to to stop it. With all the the sophistication of all the military technologies you have. And it's always important for a regional entity like ASEAN to have this preventive diplomacy, how to talk, how to sit together, dialogue, mutual understanding. That's very important for Southeast Asia to play such a role.
Okay. Now, Prof, I want to touch upon one other key issue that was repeatedly mentioned in the opening remarks, and that is, of course, about climate change.
Climate change,
Now, when we talk about climate change prevention, you talk about preventive diplomacy. Maybe that part can actually be done in a real way by our policymakers, because then it comes along in the national interest of each country. Each country needs to protect itself from ecological disasters, and that can only be done by real policies. You think there can be the area where AIPA can actually succeed in making actual strides?
You see that the partners of ASEAN also attend this meeting, right? 18, if I'm not mistaken.
18 out of 20.
So it's very important to develop dialogues with them, because these developing countries, they also need resources in order to have their transition to green energy. So the commitment of developed countries, indigenous countries, to share their resources in order to help these developing countries is also important. And let us hope that they have a productive dialogue with all these partners, so that they can fulfill all their commitments to to help with the financial resources, because It costs a lot of money to have a smooth transition to green energy in order to reduce the negative consequences of climate change.
Right, right. Decarbonization is a humongous task, especially for developing
That's true, yes.
countries.
That's true,
It has to be acknowledged, professors. And as you mentioned, we hope for a productive discussion.
Dialogue,
we hope for a cooperations to be produced at the end of the day, particularly lesson learned and exchange of technologies and how much we can adopt and what realistic level we can go to with the climate change. Professor, let's go back again to one of the key points that President Jokowi I think I would like to say bragged because the economic growth of Indonesia was higher than China, he mentioned. And that is something that our president was truly proud of. He mentioned that in front of these parliamentarians of ASEAN and also the dialogue partners. So what does he mean by this? Why do you think it is pertinent to be conveyed in such a forum? Because this is highly related to economic cooperations. Do this, in a way, influence economic policies produced by members of parliaments across ASEAN, do you think, Professor?
Yeah, you see that the government of Indonesia puts a high priority on economic policies, economic growth, and also to persuade all ASEAN members, look, it is very important to keep this momentum. If you lose this momentum, then things can be very difficult in order to proceed with your economic recovery. And another thing is that I think our president wants to demonstrate that so far Indonesia has introduced policies, successful policies in order to recover from the crisis with our economic growth and with the economic growth of ASEAN as a whole. So if they combine their resources and to keep this momentum, ASEAN can be a driver for global economic growth. And
the epicentrum, as you would
epicentrum
have
of growth. And if that is the case, then more investment will come to Southeast Asia in order to promote their economic growth, to create jobs, to build infrastructure, and also to increase their competitiveness vis-a-vis other countries.
And more importantly, get out of these middle income traps for most of our nations. Be like Singapore, like Siska, so they're like the Europe of Southeast Asia. We want to be like them. A lot of ASEAN, Southeast Asian countries like to be as prosperous and as advanced.
A lot of homework, of course, but also great potential that we should make the most of. Hopefully,
that's true. That is what they call bonus demography. So very important also to focus on the capacity of our human resources, to have a good master of technology. It's very important, because we cannot rely on natural resources. We have to change it. It is more value added for our economy, and that is what the government has been doing.
I think we're turning slowly
downstreaming,
into
the downstream
industrialization. It's
more
very
manufacturing
important.
than just
But then you need high quality of human resources among the young generation in Indonesia.
We're sending them out abroad to learn. Hopefully they'll return.
That's true. That's true. Yes.
Actually, that is also one of the key issues that's being put forward by AIPA to include more youngsters.
That's true. Yes.
And economic growth and political participation, because they believe that, and also it's actually a demographic plus point for a lot of the ASEAN member countries.
That's true.
The young demographic, so they want to put that as one of the key powers of our region.
Professor, just very quickly before, this is almost our time for the conversations. At the end of the day, this is such a significant forum here in the capital, Jakarta. What can we expect as the final results from the 44th General Assembly of AIPA?
Yeah, I think this inter-parliamentary institution can support the governments to keep the momentum. You see that ASEAN so far has been quite successful in terms of economic growth compared to other regions. And what we hope from this meeting is that the parliaments will do their best in order to support their governments, to keep this momentum and to do their best to implement policies that will give prosperity to the people, to keep the stability of the region, and also to keep the economic growth, so that ASEAN will attract investment from outside, and more can be done in order to increase the welfare of the people of ASEAN.
Prof, thank you so much for finishing at
My
such a
pleasure.
positive note. That's high energy right there.
That's
Continuing
right.
with the high energy
Thank
of
you.
the
Yeah.
official opening of the 44th AIPA General
Right.
Assembly. And also thank you for teaching us about the nooks and crannies of diplomatic bureaucracy,
My pleasure.
especially in the AIPA institution. It's been
Right.
such a pleasure to have you.
International
Thank you.
Relation Observer of the Pelita Harapan University,
Yeah.
Professor Alexius Jumadu. Thank you very much again,
Thank
Professor,
you
for
very
joining
much.
us for the
Thank you.
conversation. And that is all that we have for the special report of the General Assembly, the 44th General Assembly of ASEAN Inter-Parliamentary Assembly here in Jakarta, Indonesia. Finally, I'm Rahmat Idris.
I'm Siska Becker. Stay tuned to TVRI World for more reporting about the 44th AIPA General Assembly. Thank you for watching.
Bye-bye. Prof, thank you.